Okay, so thank you everyone for joining the April 5th session. You might be asking why or noticing that I am not John Spirko, and you're correct. My name is Martin Chaparria, so I am part of the enterprise architecture team. I'll be leading this off. We've got a couple of guest speakers as well. So just as we start all of our work group meetings, kind of a summary of what this work group is intended and how we started. So we've been meeting as a group since June of 2018. We're just over 550 members now, different companies throughout, spread out, different industries, different organizations. And it's really just one vision, right? To come together to be a leader in digital transformation, thought leadership. And so we share stories, we share artifacts, best practice. So if it is your first time, welcome to the group and thank you for joining us. We would like to, say hello to our new members. So if you would, let's use the chat function. Please go through, let us know who you are, where you're from, what company, and give us an opportunity to say hello and start building the network here. Now, with that, I do want to just set the stage for what we're going to cover today. And it's, as many of our conversations go, it's, related back to, in some way, the common service data model in ServiceNow. So if you're not familiar with what the common service data model is, it is an architectural model of how components of the ServiceNow platform are going to interact and intersect with each other. And if you look at it, it really is ServiceNow's kind of unique differentiation within the market, because it's able to tie capabilities together, truly a single data model. So look at things like, even from just foundational, our companies, our business units, our departments, our users, tying those back to products and services, to even things like contracts and spend, and then ultimately to some type of business capability, business services, and how it's provided, consumed, maintained throughout its life cycle. So adhering to the CSDM allows our customers to really take advantage of this type of data model, to help you quickly deploy, avoid unnecessary technical debt, and really just be that enabler to help you along your journey. So in today's session, we're going to talk about how you can leverage the common service data model, the CSDM, to build resilience into all aspects of the business. Kind of use this data model as the foundation for resilience and ensure that risk is going to be addressed throughout the enterprise. So with that, we have two speakers that are going to participate with us today. We have Aaron, that is from our business unit for risk and resiliency in ServiceNow, and then Andres, who is a cyber resilience officer for Centura Health. If you guys like to say hello?
Sure, I'll kick things off. Go ahead, Andres, you got it.
Just wanted to make sure that you could hear me, but hello, everybody. Go ahead, Aaron.
Hey, so this is Aaron Calloway. As mentioned, I'm principal at the Risk and Resilience business unit, and long story short, I was a founder of a company called Fairchild Resiliency that was acquired by ServiceNow back in 2019, and ironically, Andres and I have been professional friends well before that. And so it's really an honor, Andres, to present with you. And, I see Andres as a thought leader in this space and is really done some pretty creative, has addressed some challenges with really creative approaches on the ServiceNow platform. So excited to be part of this.
Awesome. Thank you, Aaron. The feeling is mutual. Since the times when Maestro was part of the ecosystem for business continuity, I've been always an admirer of your implementation. So I welcome the invitation and thank you so much for the intro.
Excellent. Well, I won't take any more time away. What I want to do today is, Andres, we'll let you go through and kind of talk to us about, your vision and how you're building out a framework and a data model to really run this resilient business on top of ServiceNow. And then we'll go to Aaron to discuss a little bit of future capabilities within the product. And then from there, if anyone in the audience, if you've got questions, please let's use the chat. And we'll also make sure to reserve some time at the end to address those. So Andres, I'll turn it over to you here.
Absolutely. And so I present out of my slide deck then?
Yes.
Perfect. Let me get that going and be able to share my screen then. And you let me know when you can see it. Can you see my screen?
Looks like it's coming up.
So just to let you know, we have a big storm here in Louisiana. It never varies. I lost power a couple times, so I have another session going on my laptop in case we drop off, where I'm connected with a Verizon MiFi. But can you see my screen?
Yes, it is up now.
I have been in business continuity and disaster recovery for quite some time, and I find this saying from our president, 34th president, Dwight Eisenhower, where he pretty much states that plans are worthless, but planning is absolutely everything. He was saying this as he was being commissioned to put the plans together after the Pearl Harbor invasion. So it was significant that he would even recognize the fact that plans are worthless. And if we start with one thing, disaster is something that is totally unexpected. A lot of times it's unknown. And so it's very unlikely that a disaster is going to go to plan. So the key here is that we need to be able to remain adaptive and be able to be ready. So it's about readiness. A lot of people ask me what resilience is all about. I can tell you that the definitions of resilience are as varied as the definitions of applications. You ask someone what an application is, and they will give you the definition of a business application or an application service or a software. But the application for us in the CSDM is that discovered application that is in the environment as an application, right? So the definitions that we're trying to put together for resilience, hopefully today, after the presentation, we'll have more clarity as to what we mean. But we already went through number one, plans are nothing, planning is everything. Number two, if we're going to go through some principles here, don't do it unless it produces tangible value. And value is, very important to what we do in the platform. And so I recommend that if you are doing something that doesn't produce any value, then you need to stop doing it. And to that, I'll give you an example. They call me and say, hey, we need to sit down and do the planning for a test, for a DR test. And after we do all this planning and we put all this documentation together, we need to go ahead and do a dry run for the DR test. And I ask him, what value does that bring to the table? When you have a disaster, it's going to be totally unannounced, right? You need to stop rearranging the chairs in the Titanic and be able to jump straight into creating value, identifying who are your pain point partners to be able to leverage them into the solution. That goes also to you should only play like you practice, right? You should never do a DR test unless it's the same way that you're going to recover. And to that end, you want to make sure that you don't put any fake controls in preparation. You should be able to walk to your network operations center and say, hey, today we're having a DR test. Here's the scenario. And then go sit on the other side and wait for systems to start failing over. We are to only build solutions that are sustainable. When we talk about disaster recovery, when we talk about business continuity, a lot of the reasons that these solutions are not sustainable is because we're not stitching them into the organization. The organization has life cycles that they follow for strategic alignment, making sure that they're competitive. They are operational life cycles that organizations follow. And so we want to always make sure that whatever we do, we're integrating that into the life cycle of everything, specifically in IT. IT life cycle, change management, ITSM, great partners to be able to develop those sustainable solutions when it comes to disaster recovery and business continuity, so that we don't have to go do disaster recovery once a year or do business continuity once a year. If we are change aware, if we are tied to the life cycle, then we are able to maintain that integrity and readiness throughout the enterprise. Service-driven resilience, and by that what I mean is the fact that we have a service platform. It's called ServiceNow for a reason. We do service mapping because the essence of ServiceNow is the delivery of that quality of service. And all we're doing is bringing the sound component to it as to how can we then offer a more sustained approach, right? So if something fails, then we have a failover capability, or we can have an active solution. And then it has to do with operational hygiene. How can we make what we do better, more efficient? And if we do that operational hygiene that is a day-to-day basis, it's a cultural shift, then we can avoid the disease management components of the surgery that is a disaster recovery component. All of this falls apart whenever compliance shows up and says, hey, where is your plan, right? Because they want to see a document. So we have to also work with compliance and educate them as to the new methodologies. So I wanted to give you a little bit of an idea as to what our current situation looks like. And in our current situation today at Centura Health, we just procured ServiceNow. And the priorities set by the organization are primarily APM and ITSM. And we all recognize that the CMDB is critical to the success of everything that we do. And so we are now establishing a resilience practice, a program, where we no longer want to be able to use Word documents and spreadsheets, right, that are stored in people's drives or team drives. We want to be able to have an integrated approach to business continuity and disaster recovery that leverages the power of the CSDM and the CMDB and ServiceNow overall, with the ability to orchestrate workflows and be able to leverage the BCM components that Aaron is going to talk about. We don't want to longer have isolated systems, right? The reason that ERPs came to life is because finance, HR, accounting, everybody had their own system, and it's the value of the integration of the data to be able to have the referential integrity of the data across the enterprise that can provide us the certainty to be able to maintain what we call the real-time enterprise, right? When we make a change, that change is visible across all of the elements of IT. And that's what we would like to be able to have in our business continuity management and our disaster recovery. We want to be able to align all our metrics, all the data that we collect with our cybersecurity metrics as well for visibility. So what this gives us is the ability to make decisions on the fly, right? To be adaptive, to change. We never know what the disaster is going to look like. We're always surprised by them, by the sheer nature of their definition. We don't have any staff dedicated to do this work today. So we are forced then to educate the different elements of staff and to bring all of this to the enterprise as part of the equation. And it's a new opportunity. We're going to have only one chance to either make it work or fail at the delivery of this. So we have to be very careful as to how we deploy this into the enterprise. In this next slide, I don't know if you can see it already, but I labeled it Building the Real-Time Enterprise. Let me know if it's coming through.
Not yet. I think we're running just a little behind.
Yeah, let me turn off my camera and see if that helps any. But in the real-time enterprise, what I'm presenting here is the view of, let me just turn off my camera if I can. Hopefully get a little bit more bandwidth. Can you see it?
Not yet, but what I'll do is I'll take
There it is.
presentation from you, and
you will present it, and that's a lot easier than.
yep.
Yeah, connectivity here is right now. I'm going through a Verizon connectivity, so apologize for that. But the storm is taking our internet connectivity down.
No problem.
Yeah, so in this slide, what I am presenting is at the bottom of the pyramid, you will see that all the infrastructure, software models, and applications are part of the discovery, right? When we go do discovery in the environment, all those elements are going to come into the CMDB and the platform through the mechanism of that discovery. It used to be Nebula that long 7 years ago. Application services, on the other hand, is something that we define and where we attach the service maps. And then we have business applications and business capabilities. Our goal, as you can see, is being able to deliver the mapping of these capabilities in ServiceNow for the only purpose of being able to deliver resiliency. So we need a CMDB. We will have to make changes to our CMDB to incorporate into it reference architecture for cybersecurity. And what that means is we're going to have to bring another set of tables that is going to educate the CMDB as to how our protections are occurring in the CMDB. And we recognize that this might be technical debt that we're creating, right? And this is where Aaron is going to expand as to how GRC and some of those other elements solve some of these problems. But this is the solution that we're about to embark on. Next slide. So this is the very basic CSDM implementation for the walk. I'm showing the colors as to what is discovered and what is conceptual and how it ties back to some of the processes like ITSM and some of the other information objects that have been matured over this CSDM version 4.0. Next slide. And this is a very busy slide, so I want to walk you from the beginning to the end. These are some of the considerations that we are taking, some of the steps that we'll take to be able to enable this capability in the shortest time frame as possible. We have a very aggressive timeline to achieving this. Is 3 months standing up some of the very basic capabilities out of the box with ITSM, etc. So as you see the number one, I'm showing the business capabilities, and one of the things that we intend to do is to buy a library of business capabilities for what is a healthcare system. And they come at multiple levels, up to 5 layers of detail, and we're just going to load them in out of the box. And we are going to create then the child-parent relationships of them, and we are going to start at the top of that hierarchy to start defining the application services or the business applications that really provide those capabilities to the enterprise. We are not going to go to the bottom leaf level elements, but we're going to start at the top. At the very same top, we will also conduct a BIA, a business impact analysis, that is going to be done in combination with APM. The 2 priorities that we have are APM and our ITSM. And by bringing APM and the BIA together, we're able to collect some of the priorities for application portfolio management in partnership with business continuity, where we ask the question at the capability level as to how long can you be down and how much data can you afford to lose. Notice that this is very different than many of the other approaches where we collect that information and we go put that information and that score against the application. We don't intend to do that. We intend to inherit from the business capability to the business application, to the application service, what are the RTOs and RPOs that we need to satisfy. Very different approach. And the reason we're doing this is because when we go to the business, we want to talk to them in business terms. We want to be able to ask them, what do you need for this capability? Not what applications do you need, but what do you need in terms of, what is the financial risk? What is the brand risk? What is this type of risk? How long can you be down and how much data can you afford to lose, right? What sensitive data do you have, et cetera, et cetera. And then we'll calculate the RTO and RPO, and then we'll spread it out on the application services components, and that's what the arrow shows. The business applications, like any other company, there is a list of applications out there. And what we're going to do is, out of this existing CMDB with that list of applications that we have, we're just going to load them into business applications. That's what the step number 2 is. And immediately we're going to start building the relationships at the enterprise architectural level as to how those map to the business capabilities. When it comes to application services, we will not copy the business applications into the application services because the business applications are not normalized because application services, we want to be able to take the environments into consideration. So we might have an application service that is related to a production environment, and we might have an application service that is related to a testing environment or an integration environment. So we are going to start bringing them in one by one. And the way that we're going to do that is we're also aligning with enterprise architecture. They're looking at some technologies that they're looking at changing over the years. And we are selecting those technologies to be the first ones that we're going to do a disaster recovery test on. And with that, we're collecting all the information about the disaster recovery test that has been done in the past, and we're building the models for those application services there. We are adding some additional tables to do this work. There's an integration table that we're adding that is going to allow us to map any of the data exchanges that we have with partners and internally, a table that we haven't been able to find in the CSDM. But we went to the work groups and had many conversations out there. And a lot of the discussions are about you just need to create your own table because you're going to need to have this information and track it. So we are in the process of modeling that. On the number 3, I identify as number 3, one of the main partners in all of this is ITSM. If I am having incidents on Monday morning after server patching and they're recurring incidents, that means that I will have those same incidents when I have to fail over, because that means that the systems are not being validated correctly prior to being put into production. And so change management and the change activities are going to be responsible of validating a lot of the CMDB records. That means that when you're submitting a change, we want to make sure that you have the correct information, and if it's not there, that they can submit a catalog item for that information to be put in place while they have a placeholder. And when we are able to go through the process of governance as to this is a new CI and this is where it belongs, this is the class, then we have validated that record, and then the change record has that as the affected CI moving forward. Release management can help us make sure that we understand that the on-call schedules are clean and complete, making sure that the service maps reflect what was actually deployed into the environment. And so those, for example, problem identify that when we have a persistent problem, that the recovery methodologies that we have for that are adequate, right? A lot of the recovery methodologies can be shared between what is in a disaster recovery environment as it is in an incident response environment. Incidents, obviously, if we're calling people in the middle of the night, they're going to let us know that they're not the right person, and they will make sure that the on-call schedules are fixed. So incidents should be a partner in that. Outages should be validating our services, right? Because outages affect our service delivery. And when we have an outage and we collect the information as to who is affected, we should be able to go back to those services and define them better. And so goes on the ITSM side. Now, going into the discovery side, we have the resilience reference architecture that I mentioned early on that we're going to have to develop. We consider this to be technical debt. That's why it has an asterisk there. And then we have recovery methodologies that are going to be also defined, that are going to be aligned with that reference architecture. All the legacy documentation is going to be transformed and converted into elements of the CMDB and CSDM to include a lot of the operational procedures, right? But when we do this, we're going to do it in an object-oriented breakdown methodology so that we can identify where the pieces of content need to belong within the CSDM and the CMDB. Lastly, in number 6, I have put the CMDB ACL abstraction. And that capability for us is to develop technical debt for us to have the management of access into the CMDB away from what would be a privileged admin account. In other words, we want the CMDB separation of duty to have the ability to define the access of records based on attributes, based on fields, and based on specific classes as to the read, modify, or create capabilities, but using an abstraction through a table where we define this, and that table becomes pretty much our governance structure for all the access to the CMDB. Obviously, we're going to have to create reports, dashboards, and a lot of other things to be able to clean this environment. Can you go to the next one? I think this is my last one, and then Aaron comes in.
Hey, Andres, there are actually a couple questions to this slide if you want to hang tight for a sec. I think
Absolutely.
you touched upon one section of it. So Brian says, what is the strategy for governance over this implementation and future CSDM decisions?
Yeah, so very interesting question. So I volunteered to be the owner of the CMDB product. And with that, I have put in a governance structure that is, number one, transparent and all-inclusive. And by that, what I mean is if the change in the CMDB has the potential of affecting a work stream, a functionality, or a related element within the data model, then you should be consulted as part of this equation. And we have created a CMDB council that has full representation from enterprise architecture, business architecture, and some of the ServiceNow folks to come to the table and then take all of that into consideration. And at the end of that, council is going to vote on a decision that is going to allow us to either reject the proposed change or accept it.
Awesome. No, and one other question here. It says, what does calculate RTO and RPO mean in the life cycle considerations for resilience when the service portfolio management application includes the commitment module where both RTO and RPO are service commitment types?
Absolutely. So we recognize that the place where RTO and RPO should live is in the service offering. That is the end state. Unfortunately, for us to achieve the level of maturity, if you go to my prior slide, I mentioned that we're at the walk state, right? And so in the walk state, what we see ourselves doing in this type of iteration is that we are going to cut some corners, but we're doing it very deliberately, knowing that APM is a priority for the business. We want to be able to ride that opportunity and climb on the train and collect the BIA information instead of having to do another BIA to collect that information. In other words, we want to collect once and use many as part of this implementation.
Sounds good. And just one last one is when performing incident or change management, what class of CI do people typically use? We use business applications primarily, but have requests to use application service. Would love input.
Absolutely. So the way that we see this is that it's a maturation process. You know, from a ability to be able to have a mature number of application services in place that have service maps developed for them. That is the place where when you have an 80-20 type solution, you should start trying to enforce the use of those application services as the affected CIs. Because what that's going to allow you to do is going to allow you to evaluate the actual risk, right? In terms of how are you exposing the risk to the capability, to the function by affecting that service. When you go to the business application, that risk methodology is not as granular as you need it from the application service. And so, but recognizing that service mapping requires for you to have a mature discovery practice and also a mature service mapping practice, it takes time. And service mapping can be tricky. You want to start service mapping at the platform level so that you can start defining your core elements of practice. And that is where the reference model that I mentioned before for cybersecurity comes into play. We want to be able to start the core service building blocks, service mapping those until we get to the application services, right? Which is what you would then expose for a ITSM process inclusion in a picker.
Hey, one last thing, and then we'll move on. Andres, it is just a clarification on that comment. It says, when you say to use application service as the affected CI, do you mean not using it as a primary CI?
You can use it as a primary CI. Affected CIs, but so when you use it as a primary CI and you use it, so it's going to give you the ability to be able to determine what the affected CIs, because those are going to sit underneath it. And so you don't have to necessarily go load all of those affected CIs into that ticket necessarily. Right? By the virtue that you're pointing to that application service, and if that application service has a service map, right, you then understand what your affected CIs are.
Oh, all right. Thanks, Andres. We'll continue on.
And so here I'm just showing how resilience for us at Centura Health is defined against what is an ITIL, ITSM ServiceNow implementation. And we want to be able to anticipate, have situational awareness out of the platform, and then be able to sustain any of the service impact. Recovery for us needs to be very adaptive because we don't know exactly what disaster we're going to have. It can be ransomware, it can be anything. And then we need to be able to learn from all of this and adapt our practice. So it's a very high level view. We've chosen in a large way the NIST engagement, and the NIST 800-160 is a good place to start with resilience for cybersecurity. I pass it on to you, Aaron.
So before we do that, I do have a question that to kind of help bridge the gap here. So looks like you're building out a service portfolio or digital portfolio over time and using CSDM to help guide for growth, for adoption. How does this then translate into other parts of the risk estate, such as compliance?
Yeah, so what we're trying to do is what we try generally when we go and deploy ServiceNow, we try to go to the business and say, hey, you have to do all of this. And instead of doing that, we recognize and we're putting cybersecurity as a business strategic component. We recognize the role that cybersecurity plays in our protection of our enterprise. And with that, we have decided to put it at the business capability level. And so by us taking that step is forcing us to load everything about cybersecurity into the constructs of ServiceNow, followed by the services that IT provides. And once we have a pretty good understanding of the flows and the processes and how we come to do this as an IT organization, then we plan to engage the business with the rest of the services that we want to be able to map and follow. It's difficult to engage the business if we don't know how we're doing this internally as an IT shop.
Understood.
And when it comes to the risk components, I would turn it on to Aaron to talk about the GRC elements and how that's going to be aligned. We hope to be able to bring the FAIR model into play and be able to use some of the vulnerability management components for integration into some of the scores, right, that are going to allow us to do all of that.
Yep, I think that's a great segue. Aaron, let me get your
Andres, thank you so much for setting the stage here. It's kind of like that iceberg effect where the way that you're deploying ServiceNow and bringing together cyber resiliency, you have a lot of the complex interconnectivity happening behind the scenes, and then your presentation layer and your management reporting that you spoke about will really raise the issues to the top, right? So all the hard work will pay off as you start through the deployment and adoption of that. So that's pretty cool to see. All right, can you all hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right, cool. So, one of the things I wanted to get onto, I'll go off the track here a little bit as I'm going to talk through the BCM journey, but as part of this BCM journey, what we're seeing is just an overall maturation in programs, right? It's, we have the COVID effect, where people now can spell business continuity management. It's spoken about in many households. It definitely is in mine, but where people have a good understanding and appreciation for what it means to our businesses, what it means to our customers, what it means to our families, and along with that journey, it's really becoming part of the business, right? It's I like to say it's great to have a resiliency program, but in my opinion, the ultimate goal is to have a resilient enterprise. And the nuance is slight, but the effect is huge, right? And Andres got into this a lot with his presentation. Is that we talk about embedding these different tasks into everyday work functions. And that's where I'm getting to the biggest piece of this around the orchestration. But what we're also seeing is that people are talking about resiliency across different areas of the business that are, frankly new to me. So like we'll have CFOs call in or say, hey, how can I make sure that my area is resilient? We're seeing more collaboration across the ServiceNow platform as a whole, whether you're looking at cyber, you're looking at HR, you're certainly looking at the CSDM or CMDB for the data that we all share, right? That's the refined, I call that data, it's the refined oil. It's how can we leverage that to make educated decisions or even to prompt suggestions around what's happening in your organizations. And so one of the biggest effects that I'm seeing over the past couple of years with the combination of the COVID effect, with some of the global uncertainty that's going on, whether it's the global economy, whether it's unrest, is that the business continuity, disaster recovery, crisis management, cybersecurity folks are all working together, right? It's almost like you have to, but beforehand, let's go back 5 or 10 years ago, cybersecurity was kind of in its own silo. They only played with their own friends because everyone else around them, couldn't understand what was going on, or they thought. So now we're seeing more of these, mutual respect and collaboration, and certainly within the ServiceNow platform, the collaboration that we're seeing within SecOps and also business continuity and IT disaster recovery. So if we walk up and step up these stairs that you see in front of us, I'm not saying that any of these are the right answer for your organization, because depending upon your organization, being at stage 0 might be fine for you, right? It could be fine. Now, from the list of these people on ServiceNow, it's probably not fine for you all. But if you're looking at a smaller business that doesn't need this automation and can manage a plan on an Excel sheet or even on a piece of paper, planning is necessary to make sure that we're all on the same page. But as we step up to, okay, now it's more of a reactive stage with something went down and how do we get everyone together and support that. Maybe this is like an Excel tool. And then when we move up to the basic and managed, this is where we really start bringing together the power of the ServiceNow platform. And it could be, and Andres has done a nice job, articulating his phased approach, right? It's how do we win the hearts and minds of the business, and while leveraging the existing data and giving people a process that's a marble, right? It's a marble as Andres is pulling in kind of common processes for the healthcare service. We're giving people data as a marble to work from. We're giving them a framework as a marble to work from and to grow from. And then when you get into these more mature areas of managed and orchestrated, a couple of the examples that I like to use that kind of workflows this across the ServiceNow platform is whether you have a new application that's coming online, a new process that's coming online, a new location that's coming online. It's the combination of what that looks like for your from your operations, but also, the question around your data governance is when we bring these things into the system. And let's say it's a process. Well, is this process a critical process? Yes, no. Well, how critical is it? 1 to 5, or how are you doing these BIAs, and what does it mean? And then how does that affect your planning and resiliency on it? Should you do a BIA on this process even before it's deployed, or should you do a BIA on this process 6 months down the road? But it really sets the stage for people within your organizations may not know you're doing a resilient. You're doing a resiliency task, but it's now become part of ingrained in your organization. And Martin, if you can move me on to the next one. And here's a bit around, this is a bit of the iceberg, right? This is a lot of the how we're leveraging all this awesome data and capabilities and functionality within the ServiceNow platform. So the more that we do on platform, I believe the more resilient opportunities we have within organizations. And when you look at the right side of the screen, it lists a lot of our risk capabilities and functionalities, from obviously business continuity. How do you evaluate risks? How do you mitigate it? Your DR planning, your vendor risk, your overall crisis management. Well, we're all working in the same sandbox, and within that same sandbox is really powerful. But it also comes together with, we need to play together, right? We need to have a good appreciation for how the CMDB and the data in the CMDB is being populated, how it's being governed, how it's being maintained. But the beautiful thing about doing resiliency on platform is that you have more eyeballs on this CMDB data, right? The more reasons to maintain and to build upon your IT inventory assets and your CMDB, the better. So as people are doing a business impact analysis, identifying your most critical applications and processes, when they're building out their BC or DR plans, they're selecting information and the data that's in the CMDB. So if your business and or your IT people don't see an application or don't see a process, it means a couple things. It means that it's either not in there, they're calling it something that they shouldn't be calling it, so you have a data normalization issue, or it might be just spelled wrong in the system, something really silly. But then we kick off Andre's data governance process, and then we have this process that looks at the information, and we update it and make it better. It's a continuous process improvement cycle for your data, and that's really what excites me. Is it really elevates our business resiliency program into a more strategic opportunity for us to really look at the entire process supply chain across the organization, because that's what we need for business resiliency, and then can be leveraged for many other strategic purposes for the business. Let's see here. So Mike, I see a question here. So Mike says, makes sense, just wondering if this can also be worked backwards. Identify capability, ask the business what services they consume to support that capability, then use that to identify business services and the applications that provide those application services. I like the other approach better, as this is a way it is proving difficult, but maybe the other way is difficult also. Mike, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. But I will say this, that the hard work pays off at the end. It is a journey, and it's something that's never going to be perfect. I don't know if it's easier. Sorry, Martin, is that something?
Yeah, I can chime in on this as well. So
yeah.
I really think that it depends on the organization. And if you look at the CSDM, the guidance is either application focused, right, where we start at the application level, because that's the language of the business. If you ask what capabilities the business have, many times in many organizations, it's the name of an app. While others are more mature and true capability mapping, where they have their capabilities identified and supporting services. So if you're an organization, and I see this a lot in tech and in managed service, where services are highly defined because there's revenue attached, and then it may make sense to go with a service down approach, which it sounds like that's what your organization may be doing. So I don't think that there is a right or wrong. It has to make the most sense for the business. I think adhering to the CSDM promotes that type of flexibility where you can start where it's going to have the most impact to your business and then still be able to scale without worrying about how APM and SPM and now digital, are going to intersect with each other.
Yeah, Martin, and it's a good point, and I'm not saying that one trend that I'm seeing out there is standing up a whole data governance office across the enterprise, and that would obviously include the CMDB and CSDM within ServiceNow, but then also your other types of applications that are out there. And I typically right now see this at some of the larger enterprises, but it certainly is an important theme that for best results should be deployed in some level of integrity, to help ensure that we got the right data. You have the right data, you can do wonderful things with it.
I agree. So we do have 7 minutes left here. So I do want to make sure that we just open up for any other questions from the group. I think we've had a really good discussion and we've had some really great questions coming through. And you can come off mute and ask a question. I'll get us started here. So, Andres, I do have a question for you. You are in a highly regulated industry. So what you're building today is phenomenal, right? I do love the approach. How scalable do you think this is to other industries, especially those that are in highly protected markets and industries?
So we have come to recognize that cybersecurity is paramount for our ability to be able to deliver services, right? Life-saving services. And as that, we have put it at the highest level of a strategic initiative. And when we do that, and we go ahead and not only build it out in the CSDM and CMDB, we're able to also show the value that we provide to the organization. That recognition of cybersecurity being one of the top make it or break it to the delivery of service is something that we all need to internalize and recognize to be able to decide, right? If it's time for us to share it and contribute, right? Take it out of the corner office that is completely locked down and be able to bring the right visibility, right, for the enterprise to manage as a strategic function of the enterprise. And when we do that, then we take the full benefit of ServiceNow. And we can also highlight the contributions of the practice, but anybody else should be able to do the same.
Fantastic. Yeah, and John just asked a great question for the group, actually, for every the audience. Who is there anyone else out there using CSDM for business continuity or even DR for that from that perspective?
Martin, that's one of the benefits of, frankly, when my company got acquired, is that we as a business unit can encourage, what the out-of-the-box CSDM looks like, and we're doing that and seeing that, and also always looking for improvements there too to see what makes sense to have naturally included within that data set.
Yeah, I should add to that. I like the fact that BCM provides the flexibility, right, to be able to deliver a lot of this functionality out of the box, right? So if it's not restrictive in the way that is implemented, it allows you to also be able to scale up with a lot of that functionality.
Yeah, and you have a few things going for you, right? You're a CMDB owner. You're federating the support, which is not just the support; it's also the accountability across the business. And then there's also a greenfield implementation, right? So you have this clean slate that you get to, this blank canvas that you get to paint, which many of us don't have.
Yeah, and the part that you don't see is the many bruises that I got at Blue Cross with an awesome team that always kept me in line as to guardrails, right? And so they were very good at providing a lot of the knowledge that has been shared here comes from the Blue Cross Blue Shield team of Louisiana that have excellent, principles and practices, right? That have allowed me to now come with a clean slate, with a new vision. So,
Yeah,
thank you.
anytime to any transformation leaders and they're asking how other organizations, do this and best practice. Yeah, we can provide some of that, but I can write you a much longer book on what not to do. So, yeah, experience definitely comes into play. Well, great. I know we've got about a minute left here, but if there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and end the meeting. Recordings, presentations, all that will be available in a follow-up. We do have a share out there. But please, if you have any questions, ideas, feedback, please send it to us. Thank you again, Andres, for the time, and Aaron. It's a pleasure having you guys on.
Sounds great.
Nice seeing you guys.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.